If you own and use an English translation of the Bible, then the next most important thing for you to have to do even the most elementary type study is a concordance to go along with that. So I'm going to discuss concordances with you now as we get to the very, very end of the class on biblical literature. There are several score of them available, probably a lot more than you realize are available of concordances for Bible study work. They aren't really a tool for advanced Bible study, but they are a tool that helps you locate passages that perhaps you've forgotten. You have some vague memory of them in your mind, but where the passage is, you have forgotten it, or to help you find verses that relate to the verse that you're studying or to the doctrine that you're studying. What you find in most Bibles, even within the biblical text itself, is some type of cross-reference system. Although that's not a concordance per se, it's certainly a cousin to a concordance because it helps you find a verse that is somehow related to the one that you're studying. It may not have the same word in it. A concordance is looking up the same word. It may not have the same word, but it may have the same theme. So it's more of a thematic concordance than it is a word one. Now, there are two broad categories to begin with of concordances. First of all, the foreign language ones, and then where we'll spend most of our time this morning, the English ones, since we're studying an English translation. First of all, the foreign language concordances. And this isn't quite as foreign as it sounds, because there are two types here. First of all, there are those foreign language concordances that are really for the use of foreign language readers. Those would be foreign to you. Then you have foreign language concordances that are for the Englishman. But I'll start up here with the first one. Foreign language concordances, this won't help you, for instance, really with the KJV, because this is a foreign language in Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic. Foreign language concordances for the foreign language reader. These are in Hebrew, Aramaic, or Greek. And what they do is simply list in, well, generally in alphabetical order. But it won't be A, B, C, it'll be Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek alphabet. They list in alphabetical order the appearance of each word and each time it appears in the original text. You know, an English concordance will start with something like Aaron. There's the first word, and then underneath Aaron would be every time the name Aaron appears. So you don't only have each word, but you have what you're really after, which is what a concordance really is, each time that word appears. Now, I've got shelves lined with these. I just brought one as an example. We'll discuss them somewhere else because they won't be a lot of benefit for you. But, for instance, here's probably the new standard reference work for Hebrew scholars when it comes to the Hebrew Old Testament. It is a concordance. You can find concordances, we'll discuss those here in a moment, to the Old Testament that are to English or that are to Hebrew and Aramaic that are coded to English, which will then help you find your way around. Whenever you end up with something like Evan Shoshan's new concordance to the Hebrew Old Testament, it's completely Hebrew. All of the entries are Hebrew. You know, everything in it. It's a Hebrew book. You start in the back of the book, to us English people. You read from right to left. The entire thing is Hebrew. So if I open it up, this will show you all those words you want to find like Yahweh in the Old Testament, but everything's Hebrew. What are the numbers? The numbers are English, Arabic. Everything else, everything in here is Hebrew. And there are no numbers, there's no coding, so you have to be able to read Hebrew. If you can't read Hebrew, or if you couldn't read Greek, if this was a Greek concordance, they really wouldn't do you any good at all. These are good for scholars, and this is something that the scholar wants to use because they do save time. If you ask, well, you know, how could that be any good? Why would anyone want to use something when it's so difficult to read? They do save time if you know the language. If you don't, you've got to look up in this book what the word is, find a number for it, find another book that's coded to that book, and you can look up the number, and then you finally have the word. You end up with 2 or 3 or more steps on your hands, and several steps are involved when you're trying to go from English to a foreign language and then find the references to that foreign language term, again, written back in English. So like all of the biblical books here in this would be spelled in Hebrew. And so it's very, very difficult to use. unless you know the language. Then it's very easy, and then it's the best thing to use. You definitely wouldn't want to use any type of coding system because it takes too long. Rather than having one book on your desk or your shelf, you're going to have 2 or 3 or maybe even 4, finding your way through those to finally get back to a concordance of the original language, which wouldn't be this one because this one's not coded to anything. You've got several of these that are available in Hebrew, several are available in Aramaic, many of them are available in Greek, and I've got shelves lined with those, but I don't think that is a study for a class in biblical literature when we're really talking about 20th century translations now, or more broadly, translations of the Bible into English. So the second thing that we would come to this morning would be foreign language concordances for the Englishman. Foreign language concordances for the Englishman. In other words, here you wouldn't be looking up love, because there are many different Hebrew and Greek terms that are translated love. You wouldn't be looking up love, you'd be looking up one of those terms that's translated love, such as agape. You'd be looking up agape. So trying to find that in an English concordance wouldn't do you any good because they don't have the term agape, they have the term love. What you need is a foreign language concordance, but you need it for an Englishman so that you can read it and find your way around it. So this is not as advanced as the type or the example of the type that I have just shown you, but it certainly is more advanced in things like Strong's, which we will come to here in a moment, or any type of English concordance. The one for the Englishman is more advanced because it'll take you back to the original term, and then it will show you places where the original term appears in the Old or New Testament, and not places in the English Bible where maybe they have translated a half a dozen different words with the same English term. Generally, they're coded, not always, but generally they're coded to some English work, these foreign language concordances, by a numbering system. Now, some of them aren't, because some of them expect you to know enough, let's say Greek, that you can find the word. Everything is written basically in English. Any understandings or any definitions that are included, which generally not many are in a concordance, the references, whether it's Hebrew or Greek, they're all written in English for you. You're expected to know at least enough of the foreign language to know your alphabet, to know what comes after what with letters in Hebrew and English, and so you can look the root word up or the basic word up yourself. We're not even going to really discuss those. The only thing I want to mention here into this are those that are coded to an English word by a numbering system, such as one coded to Strong's concordance. Strong's is an English concordance, an English one for an English man or woman. And what you have then beyond this would be this type we're just talking about, a foreign language concordance for an Englishman, and Strong's number will take you over to that. Now, I think probably most of you, or at least a large, maybe not most, maybe I need to take that back, some of you, maybe even a large number of you in this church, have this series called the New Englishments. And you've got various ones. You've got some for the Greek New Testament and some for the Hebrew Old. And I think they're hardback, brown covers, 4 volumes. That's exactly what fits under here and exactly what I'm talking about. If you have the New Englishman's Brown Driver Briggs Concordance, or the New Englishman's Greek Concordance, then you've got a foreign language one, but it's coded to Strong's. So let's say you want to find some word. You look it up in Strong's first of all, and Strong's gives a number to everything. You'll have a number by that. Then you turn over to your New Englishman's Concordance, and you simply look for that number. And that number then will give you, with the Greek or Hebrew spelling, the word you're looking for. And then it will give you all the references underneath that. An extra step is involved, however, in using them. You have to go to Strong's. You don't have to do that for the first one that I just mentioned. You don't have to go anywhere. You just look it up. Whatever word you want to find, just look it up in here. But if you don't read and write and spell in Hebrew and Greek, then you've got to go to an English one that'll give you the word you want with a number that'll take you to a foreign language one. So an extra step is involved. What I want to highly recommend under this, it's only for the New Testament, but it just solves so many different problems, maybe more than the concordances that you already have, is Ralph Winter's set. You can get it in 2 volumes. You don't even have to have both of them, but you will probably have to buy both to get one of them. One of them is entitled The Word Study New Testament, and the other is The Word Study Concordance. Christian Book Distributors does carry them for about $27 or $28. And I'm going to explain how they operate here in just a minute. If you're wanting to do any type of study, this is only for the New Testament now, not for the Old. I think you'll find these completely invaluable. You'll probably use them a whole lot. I've got a word or two we can practice with here. Well, first of all, the Word Study New Testament is the KJV, written in big, giant print, with the Strong's numbering system. This is the Strong's again, because they've got so many of these foreign language works that are now coded to Strong, since that's been the dominant concordance for an English Bible over a century of time now. And underneath every important word, you've got Strong's number that corresponds to that. So under John 10:3, to him the porter openeth. Well, porter is number 2377. You can look porter up in Strong, and it'd be number 2377. Openeth is number 455. Sheep is 4263. Hear, H-E-A-R, is 191. Voice is 5456, and so forth. You find your number there, then that is coded to several different things. That is then coded to the Art and Gingrich's Greek lexicon. That is coded to Moulton and Geddon's Greek concordance. And that is coded to Kittle's Theological Dictionary of the New Testament. This works within the tradition of Strong, Art and Gingrich, Geddon, and Kittle's Theological Dictionary of the New Testament. Now, I know I may be going a little fast for you. You'll understand better here in a moment. You don't even have to have this, because whenever you're studying something, you'll probably have your own private translation of the King James Open, your own private edition here. And you'll be reading along, and you'll see a word, and you want to know what that word means, or what the Greek is behind that, and where else that's found. Okay, you've got one or two choices. You can either open up to the exact same place here in Ralph Winter's KJV, and you'll find the number right underneath it, or if you don't have this available, you can get out Strong's Big Concordance and look up the word, and you'll find the number. Find the passage that you're looking for with the word, you'll find the number. When you've got the number, then you go to his concordance, and here's what we're talking about, concordances this morning. You go to his concordance, and it's listed, according to Strong's, with all of these numbers and with the places that the words are found. Now you say, well, why can't I just use Strong's concordance? Why would I have to use this? Why couldn't I just use Strong's? All right, I'm going to show you. Let's take the word redeemed. You've got your concordances with you this morning? All right, you need to open that up. If you've got Strong's, probably most of you, if you've got one, you have Strong's or Young's or someone's. I hope you have Strong's, because my little exercise is based on that. Let's find the word redeemed in Strong's concordance. If you don't have it, then get over near someone who does. Redeemed. Now, you know there are a lot of different words like redeeming, redemption, redeemer, redeemeth, redeemist. But the term redeemed, page 832, just the Greek. So we don't need most of those, because most of those are Hebrew there. Most of those are for the Old Testament. All right, where do we have the term redeemed in the New Testament then? Luke 168 is the earliest reference we have. All right, Luke 168, Luke 24:21, Galatians 3:13, 1 Peter 1:18, Revelation 5:9, and Revelation chapter 14, verses 3 and 4. All right, so you're doing a little word study, or maybe you want to do a little preaching on being redeemed. So you found the half dozen places where redeemed appears in the New Testament. Well, the problem with that approach is that all that does, all Strong's is a concordance to an English Bible, not to the original work. Because look over beside your references and you'll find 3 different words that are translated redeemed in the New Testament. You've got your number 3085 and 3084. If you got numbers that are right beside each other, it's just a slight variation. That's the same word. You've got your number 3085. Do you see that? Whatever word that is, we're going to look that word up here in a moment. Then you've got number 1805. That's a different Greek word, friends. Then you've got number 59. So if you're trying to really find out what redeemed means in the Greek, looking up in Strong's Concordance is really not going to do you any good, because the English people of the KJV have translated at least 3 different words with the term redeemed. Now your whole study, the whole weight of your study rests on the shoulders of the KJV translation and not on what the Greek has. And you're going to be talking about redeemed in these 3 passages as though, or these half dozen, as though redeemed equals redeemed in every one of these. And that may not be true, because different Greek words are behind that. So, if we find our number, let's say 3085, that's our first number. Then we go to Winter's Concordance here. And he's going to give us Strong's. You can go back and look in the back of Strong's and see what 3085 is. He's going to give you in the very back of the Greek word, and he's going to give you a definition of that. But see, what a concordance, maybe I need to say this before I go any further, a concordance is not aimed at giving any definitions. That's what a lexicon is. It gives you a definition or a meaning of the term. The Strong's Concordance happens to be such a big one and a weighty one that he throws in kind of for free a little Hebrew and Aramaic and Greek dictionary in the back of it. That's a lexicon back there. That's not a part of a concordance. All a concordance does is list the places where a given word is found. Since Strong's is English, all it can do is list the places where redeemed is found between Matthew and Revelation. Redeemed, not lutron, which is one of the Greek terms behind it, only redeemed. Now, maybe you got several different words you see that are translated redeemed. That's what you really need to know. If you're trying to do any study that's going to have any weight or value behind it, that's what you really need to know, not where redeemed is found, where lutron is found, and derivatives as well. So let me find, what's the number again? 3085. Okay, 3085 is found in Luke 168, and it's found in Luke 238, and it's found in Hebrews 9:12. You don't get that. You'd never know that in Strong's. That'd be impossible to know. You'd have to search all the references. Well, you see, you wouldn't even have a reference. You wouldn't even be led over to those verses by Strong's. It'd be absolutely impossible to know where this term is found. And then the one that's very similar to it, 3084, is found in Luke 24:21, Titus 2:14, and 1 Peter 1:18. You see what we're doing? You may not understand this. It becomes a little complicated because several steps are involved. But you see, with redeemed, that's a certain construction of the word. Let's take the word redemption. Back to your Strong's, if you will. Back to your Strong's. Redemption down under Hebrews 9:12. Hey, that's one of the places Winter gives us for one that we found under redeemed. You look under Hebrews 9:12, and what do you got? 3085. You see, there's that word again. Or Luke 2:38, 3085. In other words, if you're wanting to find a certain Greek term, you're going to have to go through redeemed, redeemed, redeemer, redeemist, redeemeth, redeeming, redemption, and see if any of them have your 3085. And then, of course, what you're going to run into eventually is, let's say you found all of those. So you say, now I know where all the occasions of this Greek word are in the New Testament. Then you've got the problem where on occasion the KJV people translate it salvation. And so you'd never find that, because you'd never think to go back in Strong's and look under the S's, salvation, and see if you got any 3085s back there. You'll never find what you're looking for. If you're trying to do any type of in-depth study, Strong's is completely worthless. Now, it's good for something. We'll find out what it's good for here in a moment. But it's not good for studying in this sense. And what you'll get whenever you go to Winter's is you'll start off with the basic term, which is lutron. The one we were looking at, 3085, where was that? Oh, it's lutrasis. You have lutrasis. That's the Greek word. You go back to the root word, you have lutron. That's that famous word in Catholic and Protestant theology, which is translated ransom, that he came to give his life as a ransom for many. Well, see, you're going to have to look under redemption. Now you have to know to look under ransom. And you're going to find not a 3085, but very similar, a 3083, because they're all words that come from the same family. You've got lutron, then you've got lutrao. I gave you those references for that. Then you've got lutrasis. Then you've got 3086 over in Acts 7:35 is lutrates. God sent Moses to be a ruler and a deliverer. Deliver is the English word. You'd have to look up deliverer in Strong's. You'll find all of it right here together whenever you use Winter's Concordance. You following what I'm saying? All right, let's look at another one of the numbers found under redeemed. How about Galatians 3:13? You see, Christ hath redeemed us from the curse. Christ hath redeemed us from the curse is 1805. Now, when you would see that, you'd want to start asking yourself the question, well, I wonder what the difference is then. Translated the same way, the KJV is redeemed, but the numbers aren't even close to one another. 3084 and 1805. So you go back to the back of your concordance and you look up 1805, or if you've got Winters, you look it up here. And you'll find this as one of the references, and you'll find anywhere else this term, whatever it is in the Greek, is used. And that term, 1805, it appears 4 times in the New Testament. Exagorazo, Galatians 3:13, Christ hath redeemed us from the law. Galatians 4:5, to redeem them that were under the law. Ephesians 5:16, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Colossians 4:5, redeeming the time. So your number 1805, you're going to have to look under redeemed, redeem, and redeeming. 3 different words in Strong's Concordance to find your 4 references to the number 1805. And then term in the Greek. And if you buy Winter's set, you'll learn how to use it yourself, but he gives a series of numbers. It starts with Strong's number, and then you go to a number like 4. That tells you how many times that word appears in the Greek New Testament. It doesn't matter whether the KJV men translate it 4 different ways. It's still the same Greek term all 4 different times. And you won't know that unless you use a concordance like this. And then I think what you have, the next number, 271, is a reference to Art and Gingrich, and then 341 is a reference to Gedden's Concordance, the page number, exactly where you can find it. And then volume 1, page 124, is the first out of 10 volumes of Kittle's Theological Dictionary of the New Testament, page 124. It's all right there for you. All you got to do is go by your numbers. You don't have to know any Greek or Hebrew or anything. All you have to do is be able to count from 1 to 5,000, so you can recognize your numbers. And you have these books before you, and you can go back and forth between any and all of them simply on the basis of the numbers that are first found back here in Strong's Concordance. That was the first place they were given. And because this is such a popular concordance, then others have picked that up and used it. So if you're following what I'm saying for any type of study of any word, and you don't have to be really involved in some type of deep study, but any type of word that you want to study in the New Testament, you're going to have to use something like this. Now, there are other concordances that you can use, like the ones for the New Englishman's Concordance, but they're much more involved, and they don't give you all the information you get in one volume here, where you can find this in different concordances, where you can find it in a lexicon, where you can find it in a theological dictionary. And the most important thing that you would be after is, where are the other occasions where it appears right here in the Bible? Where else does lutron appear? Where else does one of these terms appear? You're going to have something like that. That last number that we have under redeemed for the book of Revelation, see, it uses a different word. It's number 59. And I think that's related to the 1805 term. The numbers aren't anywhere near, but you look them up in the Greek, and I think that they come from the same root. And this is true anywhere. I'm sure you've noticed this as you've used Strong's. You're trying to look up a word and you find all the places, and Strong's is great for that, giving you all the places where that English word, like salvation or redemption, where all those terms appear, every time that word appears. But then you want to find out, well, what does that word mean? You look over in the right-hand side of each column and you find those numbers given that take you to the back of Strong's, his dictionary, and you find maybe several different numbers. Well, what that means, that's a clue that you should immediately pick up on. They are translating with the same English word different original terms, whether Hebrew, Aramaic, or Greek. So I need to go back and find out what each of these means. Well, you see, that'd be fine. You'd be able to locate that right in Strong's. But then what you want to know is where are all the times each one of these words appear. You'd never find it in Strong's because you don't know how they translated it in English. You'd never find it. You need to have something that's clued into or keyed into an original concordance. That is, in an original language. Something having to do with Greek or Hebrew or Aramaic. So I would strongly recommend those for a lot of the basic use that you would make of any type of concordance beyond just trying to find something in your own KJV. Beyond that, you're going to need something else. And Ralph Winter's 2-volume set is probably the best that you could buy. All right, with that behind us, the second broad category of concordances are those relating to the English language. English language concordances. That's what people generally think of when they think of concordance. You have a question before we leave?
Yeah, does that have to be bought in the 2 volumes, or can you buy the 2?
I think that you have to buy both, but I'm sure that most of the costs went into the publishing of the concordance anyway, since a lot more is involved than, printing the KJV text and a few numbers beside it. So even if you could find one and not both, I doubt you'd save much money, is the point I'm trying to make. But I think they have to be bought as a set. They're around $27, $28, something like that.
I got a question.
Yes.
I don't know if that makes any sense, but is that how you found out, like in ITP on Friday night, when we changed the different words from master to teacher? Is that where you found your information, or?
Well, why don't we try that? I thought of trying that. Let's use you could use your Strong's Concordance, and what do we want to do? I guess you want to look up rabbi. That would probably be the easiest one to do, is look up rabbi in your Strong's Concordance. And I'll quickly I could probably find it a little faster in Winter's set, because I can just turn to, if I know where at least one of the occasions is, and I could just turn over to Matthew 23 and find rabbi, which is number 4461. 4461 should be the number for rabbi. Then you go to your concordance here. .4461 appears 17 times, starts in Matthew 23 and verse 7, it's translated Rabbi, Rabbi. In Matthew 26:29 it's translated Hail Master, and kissed him. I don't remember whether I used this, but this is the type of thing that you would need to find those occurrences. You'll find every time that this term Rabbi appears. See, we can't pronounce an English word. We can't say rabbi. That's for an English concordance. You got to say the original term. If you want to know every time Rabbi, every time that word translated rabbi occurs, you need something like this. Then it'll show you every time, all 17, it'll show you how it's translated every time. So you find those when it's translated rabbi, you find those when it's translated master. Of course, that's an easy one because you only have 2 translations, either rabbi or master in the KJV. But this will show you all of them. When you get to something a little more difficult, a more complex term, then they may have the same English word being an equivalent of maybe 6 or 7 or even more than that, as many as 10 different original words. And then, you're just at a loss to even know that. But you'll find it right here in Winter. And you'll be able to find how many times that word appears. This is what you'd use for a study like that. A real quick reference work.
How do you go about knowing what to change and what not to change?
Well, this won't tell you that. You got to know more. You just got to know more about, you need a lexicon there to know what is the meaning, and you probably need a theological dictionary. What is the meaning of this term? Winter won't tell you how, that these are wrong and these are right. He's just going to give them to you the way they appear in your King James Version. You probably maybe need some commentaries. Maybe this is a unique occasion for the use of this term, and so it has to be translated differently. We don't want to become wooden. This would be completely wrong to say that every time Greek word A appears, it must be translated with English word B. That's not necessarily true at all, because just as English words, the same word, like love, can fluctuate in meaning depending on the context, so can the Greek terms. So you may have different words translating the same English term, but oftentimes that will be something that's wrong. Let's look up teaching, or let's look up teacher. Where's the verse? Well, let's do Ephesians 4:11. That's the fastest one to find here real quickly. We'll find the number. That's 1320. Teacher is 1320. So we look up here. What you'd have to look up now in your Strongs, you'd have to look under T for teacher. But what I would look up is I'd be looking up the number for the Greek word that's translated teacher in Ephesians 4:11. (1320). Now I've got the term didaskalos, which appears 58 times. I should be looking up in Strong's, because you won't find from Winter's if there are some other words that are also translated teacher. You'll have to have something like Strong's to find that. That's why all of these go together. That's why it'd be a real blessing if you were born in Israel and in Greece at the same time. You don't have to have all these books before you here. Well, you still would, because you'd still have to have some reference work to tell you where these things are found, or how many times they're found. Teacher, teachers. Yeah, see, they're giving us different words here. Well, that's Old Testament. Let me see about the New. Well, they're still giving us different ones. Look at under teachers, you've got Ephesians 4:11, which is number 1320. That's the common term, didaskalos. Then you've got 1 Timothy 1:7, desiring to be teachers of the law. You've got a different number, 3547. Remember, that's that compound term, normos didaskalos. You still have the same didaskalos, but now it's normos, teacher of the law. Then Titus 2:3, to much wine, teachers of good things, 2567. Now, if I want to know how many other times that word appears, I've got to look up 2567 in Winters. Or in 2 Peter 2:1, there shall be false teachers among you, 5572. Most things like that are a compound. I'm sure that's pseudo-didaskalos, the term for false and the term for teacher. So you still got the same term, teacher, in there. But according to Winter, teacher, didaskalos, appears 58 times in the New Testament. Well, I don't see 58 even if you combine teacher and teachers, plural, here in the Strong's. Right? I don't find 58 here. I find, maybe 15 or 20. So what does that tell us then? That tells us that didaskalos in the KJV is translated other ways, many times, other ways besides teacher or teachers. That's what Winter would tell you, and you know what that is, master. So many times didaskalos is translated as master. That's what Winter, as compared with Strong, would tell you right away then. Because if Winter tells you didaskalos, which means teacher, appears 58 times in the New Testament, and you look over here in Strong's under teacher and teachers, you don't find 58 appearances of the term. So you have to assume, all right, there must be another word that the KJV men chose to translate it by, and you'd find that from Winter. First one is Matthew 8:19. They said unto him, Master, didaskalos, Master, I will. 9:11, why eateth your master with tax collectors, and so forth.
How is it listed there? Is it listed like didaskalos and then all the places where it appears, and then how does it list the derivatives? How do we know, is this all the times that only it form of the word?
Okay. I said a little bit of that earlier, and then I left off the end because I didn't think you'd be interested in that. One way that you find the derivatives is often they're spelled so similar that they're found right on top of one another underneath it. You find, didaskalos, didaskaleia, didasko, didache, for teaching. You find most of the things related to that found right here. If you're talking about something like a normos didaskelos, where you've got, a compound word and you've got a prefix added on that, you wouldn't find that through Winter. There just wouldn't be any way you'd find that. You've got to go back to Strong here and find, anything ending with teacher, and then go back to Winter and find what the original word is, and then from that find is it used anywhere else in the New Testament. But another way that you can find derivatives, your question wasn't a derivative, you're asking more for a compound word, but back to maybe the basic root word that we would get something from, these numbers over on the far right-hand side, like number 1223 and 5495, this big word here in the Greek comes from, or at least Winter thinks they do, several other words in the Greek. So if you would first of all find teachers of the law somewhere in Winter, then it would probably give you a number that would lead you right back here to didaskelos and to nomos. You'd find two references up there. It may sound a little difficult to use, but really it's very easy. Really it's easier than anything else you'd be using. Except if you just want to find something in the English Bible, you just look up Strong's and find it. But it's a little deceptive, though, to say the least.
This system, Winters and Strong's, won't work with like NIV or anything like that?
No. Will not work with anything but a King James Version. Will not work with another translation at all. It's got to be coded to Strong, and Strong's is only coded to the KJV.
Are you going to talk, do you use the theological dictionary a lot along with that, or the lexicon?
Well, it depends on what you're after. If you already know pretty much what the definition, the meaning of the term is, and all you're after, and that's why we'd be using a concordance, is the places where it appears. If you're also after, well, what does the word mean? I'm looking up a word. I want to find where it occurs in the New Testament, and I want to find what it means. Then you've got to add to your concordance something like a lexicon or a theological dictionary. So it all depends on what you're after. But let's say you understand what the term agape means, or didaskelos means. You know what that means. Then all you're after, how many times does it appear in the New Testament? And you want to find the different contexts where it appears.
When you looked up that example about teacher and master, how did you determine that it was teacher? What all things did you refer to?
Well, that would be lexicons and theological dictionaries. If he's asking the question that was referred to a moment ago, how do you know what to change, in your Bible? How do you know what to change? Well, you just have to have more knowledge. And more knowledge just comes from more books and more study. I couldn't give you one source for that. You just kind of have to know. But the best source for that are theological dictionaries. Not dictionaries of theology, that's another thing, because that's just on Calvinism or Arminianism. Theological dictionaries. It gives you the theological meaning behind words used in the Bible. And even better than that, or maybe more basic than that, would be foreign language lexicons. You need a lexicon. That's what a lexicon is. It gives you a definition. And it gives you a definition of the word as it's found in different contexts. They won't just say, now, this is what love means, and give you an 8-sentence definition or something, or an 8-word one. They'll say it means this in these number of places. Like an Art and Gingrich, it'll give you for one Greek word maybe 4 definitions. But as long as the words aren't found that many times, then it'll give you each of the places where that definition fits.
So you mean you have to have a dictionary that has the word didaskelos in it, or the word teacher in it?
Well, it wouldn't really matter. What you're going to need is the Greek word. It wouldn't matter whether they gave it to you in the English or in the Greek, as long as you've got one of these, either one of these, Strong's or Winters or both. It's coded by number system. You don't have to be able to spell anything. Like I said, you don't have to be able to spell or write in this class. Just count. If you can count to 5,000. There are about 5,000, I think, entries here. That's all that you need. See, I didn't bring all those other works because that gets beyond what we're after. What we're really after is what we haven't gotten to yet this morning. And that is just a concordance to English translations. I was just mentioning these just to say that there are other types of concordances. And we've kind of gotten bogged down here for a little while. But this isn't what really we're supposed to be studying this morning. Yes.
Is it necessary to make any comments on the dictionary, the Greek dictionary, the Strong? Is that?
No, it's not necessary in this class, biblical literature. It would be somewhere else. Like Strong's is not reliable. I mean, how can you have a Greek dictionary and a couple of pages back there? I mean, you've got dictionaries at home that are dictionaries, like this thick or maybe this thick, but they're only this big. And then you've got dictionaries at home, dictionaries. And then there's a big difference between the two. One of them will just say, well, angle equals, and it'll tell you what angle means. And then some will say angle means this. Now, in this type of occupation over here, it means this. For a painter, it means one thing. For, a building constructor, it means something else. It'll give you all the meanings of angle. So we really don't need to comment on that, but since you asked, I will. You don't want to really base a lot on Strong's in the back there. What you want is a lexicon. That's what it is.
We use those.
It's a lexicon. Brown, Driver, Briggs.
Yeah, the 2 volumes.
Yeah, those are lexicons. Those are reliable ones. And those are coded if you've got the New Englishman. See, I've got a New Englishman's, but I've also got an original BDB, which isn't coded anything. You have to be able to read Hebrew to find your words in that then. Or at least spell in Hebrew to find your words, because you don't have any numbers to help you get there. But I don't want to burden you with the hard things. I'm trying to give you the easy things. And this is easy to use right here. And those New Englishman type concordances and lexicons are easy things to use. But concordances, just remember this, they only help you find things. They don't help you define things. Find, not define. They help you locate places, passages where that word appears. Lexicons define the term for you. So lexicons will help you make the decision between master or teacher. As a translation of rabbi, didaskalos, or whatever. I might also add that lexicons are written by men, and men, as far as we know them, are not unbiased. And it's just too bad that most of the famous lexicons, both in Hebrew and in Greek, really all the ones I can think of, are all done by liberals. Brown, Driver, Briggs, liberals. Those were all liberals. Art and Gingrich, those were 2 liberal scholars, 2 German liberal scholars. They're all liberals. You say, well, that shouldn't hurt. Your theological bias shouldn't hurt if you're just trying to define a word. Oh, it will on occasions. It will on occasions help hurt you in defining theological terms. What they're responsible for is researching all of Greek literature, finding all of the occasions of this term, and then coming out from that with some type of definition. This is what the term means. This is the definition of the term as it's used in Greek literature. But if you've got a liberal theological bias, that may bleed through in your definition of biblical terms. And you say, well, when will I know that happens? Well, you really won't. That's the problem. You just got to know too many other things. You just have to know other things beyond that. But for the most part, I would say, I don't want to scare you away from using a lexicon. For the most part, they're going to be reliable. When we get into maybe some technical theological terms like redemption or salvation, well, maybe they're not so reliable. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they are. And I just couldn't tell you when or how to know when they are and when they aren't. Just go by the leading of the Spirit, I guess. Maybe he'll lead you about lexicons. Maybe he'll tell you, just stay out of them. Let your pastor do that. Don't worry about it. Any other questions? These are valid questions, especially as it relates to Winter's set here. I've owned these ever since I've been in the ministry for years now, and this set has been a big benefit. They help you find things quickly. They don't teach you a lot. They just help you find things quickly. And we're all after that. Time-saving devices. That's what Ralph Winter said is here, a time-saving device. It helps you locate things quickly, but it's not going to teach any theology, though. It won't do that. You'll have to find something else to do that.
Will you pass that around?
Yes, if you would like, I'll send them around. All right, let's go to the second category, which is really what we're after this morning. Since you use an English translation, it's a big help to have an English concordance. This is not really for study, any in-depth study. There you have to know what the Greek and the Hebrew terms are, or at least where they appear and what they mean. We're just talking about the English language. That's all we're really concerned about at this point, since we're teaching on English translations. What a concordance does, like Strong's, basically, is it helps you to locate a passage that you only vaguely remember. Now, that's not why you use Greek and Hebrew concordances. You're wanting to find out the number of times the word appears, where it appears, and the context in which the word appears to help gather to yourself a definition of that term. So I'm kind of speaking of English concordances on a very low level, but let's face it, it's a level or purpose that we are after all the time finding a verse that we only vaguely remember, finding a passage that we only vaguely remember. Concordances like Strong's are a big help for that. The common sense rule is to choose the least common word that you can recall in the passage. Let's say the passage begins with the word thee. Don't look up thee in the concordance. You'll be until doomsday trying to find that verse you're looking for. None of you have ever done that. All I can remember out of it's thee. If that's all you can remember, hang it up, friends. Strong's, you'd have to have him resurrected from the dead to ever help you. You've got the common sense rule is to choose the least common, the most uncommon if you prefer it that way, the least common word that you can recall. Now if you say, well, I can recall the terms the, a, and an, well, you'll never find it. Well, I can recall the term said. Well, I still doubt you'll ever find it. I remember God. I still doubt you'll ever find it. There are thousands of times that God appears in the Bible. What you need is whippersnapper. Now, if you've got that term, you'll probably find that, because that doesn't, I don't think it occurs at all. A term like that, a rare one, if it's a rare term, you're going to find it in a hurry then. And then whenever you find that word in Strong, it'll say, listen, this word appears 3 times in the Bible. Well, all you got to do is look up 3 passages. And 1, 2, 3, behold, here I've hit it. This is the verse I was looking for. But if you're looking for the, and, God, run, said, sun, light, truth, it's going to be very difficult to find because you have so many different places that word appears. Let's do a little practice on this then. There are some disadvantages to the use of Strong in this regard. Let's take the term atonement. Atonement. And somebody's got my books out there now. We have to send the concordance back up here so we can finish practicing. Whoever's got that's the big thick one. You'll send that back up here. I'll use that. But you can be looking up in Strong's. Look up atonement in Strong's. And we're going to be doing the New Testament since that's what I have here. What do you have? Atonement. I mean, that'd be an important term, atonement. We're talking about the New Testament. I can tell I've never taught on theology around here, because one of the things you say when you start teaching on atonement is the word only appears once in the New Testament. Do you see that? It only appears once in the New Testament. Where's that? Romans 5:11. We have now received the atonement. It only appears once. Atonement. Well, that's an important term in the New Testament, or it should be, I would think, atonement. It appears a lot in the Old. Under basically, you see one Hebrew term, 37:22 or 37:25, basically the same term. 2643 is the number. That word, katalage, appears 4 times in the New Testament. Only translated atonement 1 time, but the Greek word katalage appears 4 times. It appears in Romans 11:15 and 2 Corinthians 5, verses 18 and 19. And what the word means in the Greek is not atonement, it means reconciliation. And it's so translated in those other 3 places it appears. Romans 5 happens to be a very technical chapter on the doctrine of the atonement, and for that reason, and for that reason alone, the KJV men chose to go with that English term that means this doctrine, but it's not an exact translation of katalage. Katalage means reconciling or reconciliation. Romans 11:15, the reconciling of the world. 2 Corinthians 5:18, the ministry of reconciliation. And 19, the word of reconciliation. And then we get to Romans 5:11, by whom we've now received the atonement. Literally that means reconciliation. So if you're wanting to study the atonement in the New Testament and you're using Strong's, you look up atonement, you find it 1 time. You've got 1 verse. You base everything on 1 verse. Well, you'd have a problem there because the doctrine of the atonement appears just many, many different places under different words. And of course, secondly, the word that's translated atonement here doesn't really mean atonement. It means reconciliation. And it doesn't appear only in Romans 5:11. It appears 3 other places in the New Testament. So there's a pitfall that you have to avoid whenever you're using concordances like this. I'll stay with what I said to begin with. Basically, why you'd be using a concordance like this is to find a verse that you only vaguely remember. You're not trying to study passages or study words out. You're going to need winter set to do that. But how many times, and this is a great benefit to have something like Strong's, when you remember some verse and you want to look it up so you can memorize it or quote it or just find it and find what the whole thing has to say, and all you can remember are a few words from it, then it's a good practice to look something up in Strong's. So back to concordances, English ones. They can only serve, any given concordance can only serve one English translation. A different one has to be used for every different English translation or version, assuming one has even been printed that covers that translation, and many aren't covered. So there again, that's the advantage of knowing the biblical languages. For English concordances, there are 3 different types. Concise, complete, and exhaustive. Oftentimes, the very name of the concordance contains one of these words, although not always. Concise, complete, and exhaustive. And let me kind of explain what I mean by each of these terms. Concise, these are often very, very small books, and they give you just a small representative sampling of, let's say, the number of times Jerusalem appears, or the number of times Jesus, or the number of times Abraham appears in the Bible. They try to highlight important people, places, and things, and give you a few references to them. This is what is included in the back of your Bible. This is called a concise concordance. Most Bibles have some type of concordance back there, and they're the scourge of Bible study. They're the scourge of trying to locate anything. How often have you tried to quickly find something and you turn to the back? I would say they ought to be cut out of Bibles. I'd rather have a $5 reduction on the price of my Bible than pay for this worthless thing. It's a worthless group of rags back here. That's my genuine opinion. I love a concordance, but not one that doesn't tell me anything, though. It generally has every appearance but the one I'm looking for back there. Or out of, 50, it's got 10. And, you're lucky. You're really lucky if your one happens to be one of the 10 that is found back there. They are of very, very little use. I would imagine maybe even during church or something, or maybe during worship, something's come to your mind, a verse, and you want to look it up. Right? Hasn't that happened? And you don't pack this on a backpack, Strong's big old thing on your back, and carry that thing around and whip that boy out and look up something. You've got your little Bible here. And during worship, the Lord brings something to your heart, and you just want to find that verse to share it or whatever, and you go back here and slam that thing down. You won't find it back there. Now, we're all laughing because we've experienced that. I don't even use that worthless thing. I'm tempted to get a penknife out and cut that thing out of there. I would, except maybe once or twice in my life I actually found the verse I was looking for. So I think I'll leave it in there. But most of the time, you won't find what you're looking for. I don't even know why they print concise. Concise means that. Concise concordances. Because you rarely find what you're looking for. So I would call these not only concise, but they're very humorous concordances. They're ones that cause you to lose the victory. Because you're trying to find something in a hurry to minister, share, or testify about, and you just, seems like you never can find it. Then we've got, in the second place, complete concordances. They're, of course, much, much better. Complete and exhaustive are similar. They're the two to have. Concise are just not worth the paper they're printed on. It's my opinion. I think from your response, that's your opinion. The only thing they're good for is that they're small and they're compact and they're handy. I've got several little ones, these little testimonial size books of a whole concordance of the Bible that you can slip in your back pocket. But most of the time you won't find what you're looking for. A complete concordance is this. It omits any coverage of insignificant words, such as a, and, the, to, him, it, things like that. They omit coverage of words that are not significant. That's a good practice to follow because you're rarely looking up a verse on the basis of a or the or to. To give you an example, Nelson's Complete Concordance to the RSV has a list of 130 words that it does not cover. They would call those insignificant words. What they mean by insignificant is simply that probably there are simply too many of them. Insignificant, maybe that's a poor term to use because I think Nelson would even include something like God. God just appears too many times. So it's not an insignificant term except insofar as trying to look something up in a concordance. Can you imagine trying to find a verse that all you could remember had the name of God in it? You'd never find the verse. 5,000 times you'd have to have a reference to God. So words that do not help, let's say it that way, in locating a passage are dropped. They don't help, so there's no sense in including them in a concordance. A, and, the, to, him, she, thing, I don't know what they all are, God. Words that appear hundreds and hundreds of times are dropped. Now, those 130 words that are dropped from Nelson's RSV account for 60% of the Bible's text. You want to know how much of the Bible is insignificant terminology of a's, ands, and these, and hims, and hers, and its, and things, and God? 60% of the Bible's text is not even covered in Nelson's RSV concordance because they dropped these words. That concordance happens to already be 2,157 pages long. To include these 130 insignificant words would push it beyond 5,000. I mean, it's already huge. You wouldn't want a concordance 5,000 pages thick. Or you could take Holman's Concordance to the New American Standard Bible. They list 51 words not dealt with. Now, that's not a trait of liberalism or something. It's just common sense. You're not going to find the verse you're looking for by looking up a or the, so just leave them out. Leave out references to those. Those are complete concordances. Then thirdly, you have exhaustive concordances. Exhaustive concordances. Strong's is certainly the best known here. Strong's itself exempts 47 words from full coverage. That's the difference between an exhaustive and a complete one. Strong's is a concordance to every single word in the King James Version. In other words, Strong has a list of every single time the word a appears. But it's exempted from full coverage. I'll show you what I mean by that here in a moment. The exhaustive concordance or the complete concordance would be the one to have. By far, they're much better than a concise one. If you can get your hands on it, if the publishers even have one available for whatever translation it is you want to study. If you go to kind of toward the end of Strong's, once you get past the last letters of the alphabet, what page? 1221? 1221 is an appendix of the main concordance. You've got 47 words back here that are not treated completely or fully as the other words are. And look what the first word is, A. But look at your reference, and you have it. Genesis 1:6 would be the first time A appears. Genesis 1:29. But you compare that to your other words earlier in your concordance, and you have like 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 words out of the sentence printed to help remind you of exactly what that passage is saying. You don't have any of that back here. That's why they've left that out, because they didn't feel it was important. You'd have so much material if you had to do it that way. You go down to Genesis 4:12, or 4:2, I guess, is the first time, and you've got A that appearing 2 times. That's what that little superscript 2 is. A appears 2 times. Well, I don't know that I've ever used this appendix here. I wouldn't see what value it has. I'd never be looking up a verse under A. Or the other words that we have, and be, from, him, his, in, it, not, of, she, thee, they, to, upon. Those are some of the words that are covered here, 47 that are covered. They're covered completely in the sense that every time they appear, they have a reference to it, but we're not given part of the sentence. The next thing that you come to in Strong's is a comparative concordance that shows you the difference between the 1885 English Revision and the 1611 KJV. Shows you the differences between the two on important passages. And the way you know whether or not your passage or your word or your verse appears is it'll be referenced, it'll be starred back in the main part of his concordance. And then after that, you've got your foreign language dictionaries. You have any questions on that? I'm going to conclude by giving you a list of some concordances here. You understand what Strong's is? I would assume that you do. And how to use it. Some of Strong's, I think, is just kind of extra material that that really shouldn't have been here. This comparative concordance doesn't do us a whole lot of good, and I don't think the dictionaries do us a lot of good, and not even the appendix to the original concordance. The thing I've used Strong's for, if I've used it, is back here in the main part of it to find a verse that I can only remember bits and pieces of. But let's do one sampling from Strong's before we go beyond this. I'm going to read you a passage, and you're going to tell me where this is. This is a passage that has come to your mind, your attention has been called to it, and you want to find where it is. Now, if you know your Bible expertly, then you'll be able to tell me chapter and verse for this, but you probably won't. The mountains saw thee, and they trembled. The overflowing of the water passed by. The deep uttered his voice, and lifted up his hands on high. The sun and moon stood still in their habitation. At the line of thine arrows they went, and at the shining of thy glittering spear. Let's say you want to find where that is in the Bible. Does anyone know where that is? Psalms? No, not in Psalms. Even if it was in Psalms, where in Psalms? You wouldn't know. That's what Strong's is for. You've got the verses. I'll read them again. You've got some words. You've got to pick a word now. And you've got to find that in Strong's, and then it'll lead you to the passage. I'll read it to you again. The mountains saw thee, and they trembled. Now, what's the rule when looking up something in a concordance? The least common word. Don't pick thee. I wouldn't even pick mountains. It appears too many times. No? Or what are you looking under? Mountains? What? Glittering. Oh, okay. That'd be pretty good. She's picking glittering there. Habakkuk 3:11. All right. What'd you look under?
Glittering.
Glittering. All right. Let's look at some. Turn over to Habakkuk now. See, that's stuck way back there in the end of Habakkuk. Habakkuk, I read chapter 3, verses 10 and 11. If you turn over there in your Bible, look at the different words. You've got many options. If you remember it, assuming you remembered all these words, you've got many options for finding it in Strong. You've got the option water. See, I wouldn't pick thee or saw water. That appears about 400 times. You'd be looking through 400 small print times to find it. Mountains, that's about 200 times. Or what about there in verse 11? The moon stood still. Well, moon appears about 50 times. Spear. You remember the word spear? That appears about 50. Arrows appears about 41. It's getting easier. You see, the fewer times it appears, the quicker you can find it. Trembling. 19 times. Uttered. If you pick that word, that'd be easy. You could find it with 17 references. Shining, 11. Overflowing, 10 times. But you picked it quickly. The most rare, the most uncommon, the least common of the important words in this passage is the term glittering. And it appears about 6 times. So you look for your least common term, you pick that, and you look it up. Glittering is certainly the least common of the important terms. You wouldn't want to look under something like sun. Well, that's hundreds of times S-U-N is found. Sun would be like looking the term the, or saw, or and, or they. Okay, let's end with a list of concordances to English translations then. Just to make the record complete, I think you understand the principle behind these now. First of all, concordances to the KJV. Concordances to the KJV. First of all, under that, Cruden's Concordance, because you've got different publications of Cruden's. Cruden's, C-R-U-D-E-N. Cruden's, I think, was one of the earliest concordances ever to be written back many hundreds of years ago. All right, you've got Cruden's Complete Concordance, published by Zondervan in 1949. You've got Cruden's Compact Concordance, published by Zondervan in 1968. You've got Cruden's Concordance Unabridged, published by Ravel in 1982. So that will tell you what the most recent publication of Cruden's is. It's by Ravel, a half dozen years ago. And Cruden's, all of Cruden's concordances are concordances to the KJV text, not to NIV, but KJV. Then secondly, under KJV, after Cruden's is Young's. Young's. Under Young's, we have Young's Analytical Concordance, published by Erdmans in 1955. And we have Young's Analytical Concordance by Nelson, 1982. Then thirdly, we have Strong's. Cruden's, Young's, Strong's. First of all, we have Strong's Exhaustive Concordance, published by Abingdon in 1980. I'm not giving you all of these. Strong's goes back to the end of last century. These are some recent ones. You've got Strong's Exhaustive Concordance, published by Holman in 1982. You've got Strong's Concordance, the popular edition, by Nelson in 1980. And then finally you have New Strong's Exhaustive Concordance by Nelson in 1984. The New Strong's Exhaustive Concordance by Nelson in 1984. Now, my mainstay, and the mainstay of a lot of people over the years, has been publications, they even went back earlier than 1980, by Abingdon. That's what this is. This big green thing is an Abingdon publication of Strong's. Abington's is rather hard on the eyes. The print is small, the print is obscure on a few places. So the new one, which has just come out a few years ago by Nelson, is the same thing. It's Strong's, it's exhaustive, it includes the whole Bible, but Nelson has entirely reset Strong's Concordance to help the strain on the eyes. You get for the most part, you get the same things in Nelson's that you get in Abingdon's Strong's Concordance when it comes to simply looking up words. But it helps the eyes. So if you don't have a concordance and you're in the market for one for the KJV, I'd recommend Nelson's rather than Abingdon's. Nelson's is better type, better print, it's just a lot easier to read. Strong's is small, or Abingdon's is small print, and sometimes a rather obscure type. Some type of Strong's is the best one to have, because any of your Greek and Hebrew things that are coded are always coded to Strong's. They're not coded to Young's, and they're not coded to Cruden's, and they're not coded to anything else. Strong's has been the mainstay of English concordances. If you're going to have a concordance to the KJV, it should be Strong's, because all of your Greek and Hebrew things, if they're coded at all, are coded to that. All right, those were concordances for the KJV. Then secondly, for the NIV, For the NIV, you have the NIV Complete Concordance. Notice the name. They don't call it exhaustive like Strong's. The NIV Complete Concordance by Zondervan, 1981. It's only one I know of to date that is printed to go along with the New International Version, which is this book here. You notice how small it is. It doesn't contain all the things that Strong's does. You don't have your dictionaries and all of this stuff in it. The only reason to use this would be if you're trying to find something in the New International Version. And you'd have to be familiar enough with the New International Version to remember certain words. And you see, when you start using a lot of different translations, you know, it's kind of confusing. Well, I remember a word. Well, what translation was that in? Was that KJV or NIV or RSV? Or, well, you have to know which translation before you can know which concordance to use, before you can ever find the term. So this is the one that's available for the New International Version. Then for the New American Standard Bible, the NASB Exhaustive Concordance by Holman, 1981. It looks a lot like Strong's because it's such a big, huge, mammoth thing. This is an exhaustive concordance for the New American Standard Bible, published by Holman, 1981. Then fourthly, the ASV, A Complete Concordance to the ASV, published by Nelson in 1922. Not many people use that anymore, so that's not even in print any longer. Then for the RSV, you got several of these. The Oxford Concise Concordance, 1962. Nelson's Complete Concordance, that's the big one to the RSV. Nelson's Complete Concordance, 1978. An Analytical Concordance to the RSV, published by Westminster in 1979. And then a concordance to the Apocrypha Deuterocanonical books of the RSV. Some RSVs have the Apocrypha, the extra biblical works. So you've got a concordance to those non-biblical books. A concordance to the Apocryphal Deuterocanonical books of the RSV, published by Erdmans in 1983. Next translation, Moffat. You've got the Moffat Bible Concordance by Harper, 1950. For the New American Bible, the NAB, you have Nelson's Complete Concordance by Nelson, 1977. For the Jerusalem Bible, you have Modern Concordance to the New Testament. It only covers that aspect of JB. Modern Concordance to the New Testament by Doubleday, 1977. For the Living Bible, I don't know why you'd ever need one for that word. You're not going to be studying anything anyway. You have the Living Bible Concordance, which is out of print. It's no longer available. For TEV, today's English version, you have Concordance to the GNB. They call it here with the name Good News Bible. It's the same Bible, of course. Concordance to the Good News Bible. Nelson, 1983. And then finally, for the NKJV, the New King James Version, you have the Complete Concordance, Nelson, 1983. And that's not a list of all of them. That's just a list of some of them. I've got some other lists, but I thought it'd just bore you too much to look at all of those. All I'm trying to show you is look how many concordances there are. So many of them, there's so many different translations. And the production of so many translations is what has led to the production of so many concordances here. In conclusion, my own recommendations this morning would be Winter's Set, would be Strong's Concordance, published by Nelson. You get essentially the same thing as Abingdon, but the strain is not so great on the eyes. And then if you use the NIV or the NASB very much, you'd have to use it a lot to make it worthwhile, then the two concordances that go with them. Otherwise, there's no sense, because you're just never going to be looking something up. You see, the Bible that you're familiar with is the one that floats back into your memory with certain terminology. Therefore, you need a concordance that will match the Bible of your memory. And the Bible of most of our memories is the KJV, and not some other Bible. If it happens to be some other Bible for you, you keep remembering phrases from another Bible, and you get confused when you try to find it in Strong's. Strong's won't give it to you. Strong's only gives you those for the KJV. Then you'll have to buy a concordance that matches that translation. But I would say Winter's Set, Strong's, published by Nelson, and if you need and would use them, the NIV Complete Concordance and the NASB Exhaustive Concordance.